Yo, what is going on, Comfy Gang? It's your boy, Comfy NEET. So, for today's video, I'm going to be going back to my usual Denpa. I think that's like, Daniel Lord. And, the whole like negative ranting type videos, I guess. I'm going to be going back to that for my usual content, but I will be uploading some like NEET Ascension stuff in the near future and trying out some different stuff. So anyways, stay tuned for that. But today I wanted to talk about something that I guess might only be specific to me, but I feel like a lot of NEETs might relate to this because it basically addresses a lot of the alienation that I feel from the world around me, from society, from people, and why I never feel like I fit in. And that's because, well, yeah, I'll be talking about why I feel like I don't fit in, why I feel like I don't belong, and basically by extension why I don't have a core identity, I guess. And well, I do have a core identity, but it's kind of like fragmented, and how that makes me a NEET. So I guess this is impossible without telling a little bit about myself, because I feel like I haven't really talked about that, my background, where I came from. So I actually grew up, this is such doxable information, but yeah, so please don't dox me unless you're gonna send me some Amazon gifts from my wish list, which I'm gonna make soon. I'm just kidding, but anyways, so the story of me starts in the little island of Taiwan. Some consider it a part of China. I personally don't, because I grew up there and I've never experienced any, direct political influence from China. So obviously I have pretty strong feelings about that, but then that might just be me being brainwashed by whatever propaganda, whatever the powers that be, who knows, but that's besides the point. I grew up in Taiwan, which is a predominantly East Asian, predominantly Mandarin speaking country, and guess what? I don't speak any Mandarin, and that should be telling you something right there. But basically, I am, despite growing up in an East Asian country, and despite looking East Asian myself, I am actually biracial, like the rapper Logic, who always says that he's biracial. But I am not just biracial, but triracial. I'm actually half ethnic Chinese, 3/8 Filipino, and 1/8 Spanish, European Spanish. And basically because of that already, I always look different from a lot of the people that I grew up around, although maybe less so than maybe some other places in East Asia, because there is an Aboriginal population in Taiwan whom I share some of the features with, so I do pass for Taiwanese sometimes. But a lot of times people will ask me if I was mixed or not, so I've always had that going for me already, where I've always been sort of exotic, and I have noticed that people, I'm not going to say have treated me badly for it, but they definitely already treated me with that sort of outsider mentality, which is very common in East Asia. Not even as much in Taiwan as in places like Korea or Japan or even China, where ethnic purity is really a huge part. It's a huge. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It is a pretty huge aspect of these societies where they're not going to treat you badly per se, but you will always be sort of an outsider if you don't look alike, first of all. And obviously that can easily change if maybe I could pass for a Taiwanese person if I spoke Mandarin fluently and I understood all of the cultural, I guess, the different cultural idiosyncrasies of Taiwanese culture. But sadly, I don't, because I was pretty much isolated from that, because my parents, even though my dad is ethnically Chinese, coming from the same area that a lot of the Chinese that came to Taiwan came from, he actually grew up in the Philippines, so I guess in a sense he could also relate. But he grew up in the Philippines and essentially moved to Taiwan for work where I was born. And because of that, I grew up in a household that spoke English. The first language that they tried to speak to me was English, because I guess they did have this awareness at the time that English was probably the most important language to learn. And, obviously China is catching up economically, but by and large, English is probably one of the most important languages to learn. It's the language of business and everything. So my parents taught me to speak that at home. They spoke it to me, but they spoke it to me with a Filipino accent. So, but I guess you guys don't seem to notice that I have it slightly. Maybe some of you do, but maybe it's all in my head. But I grew up speaking English with a Filipino accent. So, it's like, yeah, so there's that. And I grew up, so the moment my parents had to send me to school, they initially tried sending me to a local school, a Mandarin speaking school, but it ended poorly, as you might expect, because I literally couldn't communicate with any of the kids according to them. So what I would do is I basically spent maybe 2 or 3 weeks just spending time all alone by myself, not eating any of the food, because my parents never fed me any of the local food. They basically fed me, this is going to sound really strange to some of you, but Spam, eggs, and rice every single meal, because that's all I would eat. So I was being fed that basically for like from the moment I could eat solid food, that's all I was eating. Obviously I wasn't the most in shape kid, but I couldn't eat the local food. I couldn't communicate with any of the kids. So already you could sort of see the effects of being from these disparate cultures, these different, unique, whatever, differing cultures. Definitely affected my ability to blend in with the local culture. And maybe that would have changed if they had just forced me to stay there. But my parents obviously meant well. They wanted me to, maybe it's actually a better thing that they sent me to an American school, in fact, but that's what they did. Got me into this American school. I managed to pass the whatever examination to see if I qualified, if I was whatever, if I could speak English well enough and stuff like that. And I got in, so I was in this American school and basically being inoculated from the local culture, because I basically go straight from school to home, because my parents were helicopter parents. So, and this basically happened all the way from kindergarten to 11th grade, where basically right after school ended, my parents would pick me up, and it was kind of just expected of me to do so, and I never really questioned it. And I asked them several times if I could hang out at school and stuff, but they said, no, you can't, because I don't have time, and you need to go home and do your homework and all that stuff. So I just kind of went with it. I never really put up any of a resistance to it. So I would just go straight from school to home and never get the chance to be, maybe go out, leave school with friends, and maybe go around and experience local stuff until much later on. It's really only until I hit 12th grade that I finally sort of stood up for myself and got to hang out after school and spend time with friends. And that's really when I started to identify with the local culture a little bit more than anything. Well, that's not necessarily true, because that's why it's really hard for me to explain. It's complicated. Like, I was basically only speaking English. I could only speak like basic conversational Mandarin, where I could basically get by and order food and things like that, call a cab, but I couldn't, make friends with the people who were around me. But at the same time, I could basically only relate to all these like expat kids and I guess American born Chinese, American born Asians, and like white people and whatever, and like Hispanic and black people who all grew up in this very unique sort of like melting pot, I guess, of, for lack of a better term, of like basically like international school kids. And that's pretty much the only people that I could really relate to. I couldn't, and it's kind of like this own like very like isolated like ecosystem. And like the kids that I tended to but the thing is that like the kids that in the school that I went to were like really like upper socioeconomic status. Like they were extremely wealthy, and I, on the other hand, was just middle class at best. So I always felt this sense of poverty, and that sort of made me very ashamed of myself, and it made it hard for me to fit in a lot of ways too. Just like that's something I could talk about in another video, like why I felt poor even though I wasn't, but probably sound really ungrateful. But anyways, yeah, so that's one reason. And so the thing is, like, I spent all this time in this unique sort of ecosystem, and I sort of grew up influenced by both cultures in some aspects, where it's like I was introduced to all these Western ideas, but at the same time, the sort of underlying sort of expectation of obedience to authority, absolute obedience to authority, and knowing your place and having a work ethic, and not having a work ethic, but like, I don't know, just like almost having like too much of a work ethic, and placing your importance, all of your attention on social status and grades, because all the parents were Asian, mostly were Asian, and everyone was basically competing against each other in that environment, and I was in the midst of that, so that influenced me. So it's like I was basically influenced by both these cultures, and at the same time, I feel like I never got the chance to, I don't know, just be exposed to one set of, I don't know, ideas and beliefs, and that I shared with all my peers, I guess, like everyone. So it's like I would go to and from school, but every time I was outside school, I would basically feel like an outsider, even though I already felt like an outsider in school because of my social ineptitude, because my social skills were basically a lot less than they are now. I'm not even socially adept right as of now, but back then my social skills were far worse, and I basically felt like an outsider already for all the reasons I mentioned before. And then when I left school, it's like I couldn't make any friends with the people around me. I always felt like this outsider every time I wasn't in school, buying food. Like people always asked me if I was on vacation, if I was visiting, or if I grew up in America. And it's like, yeah, so I never really felt this. And it's like I'd always see these like Taiwanese like shows and stuff on TV and these cartoons and things, but I would mostly just stick to Cartoon Network, which was what they had on TV there, the only, and I guess Disney, Cartoon Network. And it's like even some of my friends who are like more on the Taiwanese, some of the kids who are like more on the Taiwanese side of things in my school, like I couldn't really relate to them, because it's like, yeah, like they would have, I don't know, I couldn't relate to them as far as like all the pop culture references and all the things they were into. And it's like, but I think to a large degree some of it is me as well, because like people would always jump on these bandwagons and these trends, and I would never seem to follow along. For whatever reason, some part of me would just sort of ignore it because I found it boring and I didn't find it interesting, and I would just go off and do my own thing. So maybe it really has nothing to do with the culture that I grew up in, or my race, or whatever, my ethnicity. I don't even know what half of these words really mean anymore, but it's just, I ended up just picking and choosing the things that I found interesting on the internet, and sometimes I would find people that I relate to, and I guess we would get along as far as those things went, and then other times it would be other people. But then I'd never feel like I truly belonged with anybody, and it's more like I only felt like I could be truly authentic with myself. I always felt like I had to hide certain aspects of myself from other people, and maybe that's from being bullied and made fun of for certain things too. So that's obviously another contributing factor as to why I never felt like I belonged. But I feel like the reason I'm bringing up culture and race into this, because maybe this is just my misperception of things, but I feel like a lot of people like to talk about their roots and where they came from, and a lot of times they talk about how, you know, they're like, oh, like I'm like this, or I'm a proud I don't know, I'm proud Japanese, proud Korean, proud Jamaican, proud American, proud this and that, and me and my friends grew up doing this and that, and it's like, or like they all know like the same music, they all have similar music, and it's like I can never relate to anybody, where it's like I sort of just picked and chose my own culture. And it's like, so for whatever reason, I just really like hip hop and R&B, and more recently I've been getting into things like some of the electronic stuff and more like popular stuff, and learning to appreciate more genres. But it's like, for the longest time I just kind of just like picked my own stuff that I was interested in, watched my own like TV shows that I liked, and people would talk about things and I have no idea what they're talking about. Well, this is not exactly true. I did enjoy Game of Thrones and stuff like that when the show was still good, when it first came out, but Breaking Bad too, I guess. But oh yeah, and it's like I would only jump on these sort of bandwagons, like watch these popular shows maybe 2 or 3 years after people watch them already. That's like, I would just check them out of curiosity and eventually learn to like them. Or sometimes I would check things out that people were interested in and I just wouldn't like it or wouldn't get it, and maybe a few years down the line I'd check it and finally learn to appreciate it. So maybe it's that I'm sort of like a late bloomer, and that my brain, I'm just like a few steps behind everyone else, so I just don't tend to fit in with people because of that. But it's like, I don't know, I just have found it really hard to find people that I really get, that I like share the exact same like music taste with, or like, I don't know, stuff like that. I don't know, music is just one of those things that seems to be like a benchmark of, you know, your cultural similarity, I guess. So that's why I mention that a lot. But yeah, that's, I guess, another reason. And another reason why I feel like I don't belong is because well, I did have some bad experiences with racism, which I could talk about in another video. It wasn't even that bad compared to a lot of other stories or people's experiences, but I definitely did have my share of it. And at the same time, I also was, you know, had this really traumatic experience in the Philippines where I was mugged, and not mugged, but like robbed at gunpoint. So it's like, that made me hate myself for being Filipino, because I hated Filipinos because of that experience, because it happened when I was like really young. So that caused a lot of confusion in me, where I hated myself for being Filipino, but then I also got racist remarks for being Filipino from Taiwanese people, namely the people in my school, but also sometimes like outside of school. So I kind of like hid that part of myself, and really felt embarrassed whenever I was, whenever it was mentioned that I was Filipino. I really felt ashamed of it, but at the same time I also felt a lot of resentment at the fact that I had to feel ashamed that I was Filipino. So it's like I hated myself, and then I hated the people who hated me. And this was in the country that I grew up in. And then moving over to North America, like it's like the East Asian culture has made it so that I don't fit in here exactly either. It's like I can't appreciate all the memes, and it's like I almost have to LARP to fit in. And I feel like LARP meaning pretend or like live action role play for like the normies out there. But so it's like, and it's made it where that I feel like I don't have any true place, true country, true area, true group of people where I can fit in the real world. It's like I could go back to Taiwan or anywhere. Obviously, I wouldn't feel at home in somewhere like Korea. I'd have to make it my home, or like Japan or China, because they're extremely like very like culturally, I don't know, strong or whatever. And it's like if I go back to Taiwan where I relate the most, I still don't relate enough where I feel at home. And it's like the Western culture that has influenced me has made it so I find certain aspects of Western culture far better than what's in Taiwan and in East Asia in general. And at the same time, it's like a lot of the East Asian culture has made it so that I prefer things in East Asia. And it's like I just wish there could be this sort of fusion society where these multiple cultures are, sort of maybe like a country or even like a city where it's full of people like me, where I could relate to and, get along with and like bond over things, because, it's just like we all get each other. And it's like I've never been around people like that. And maybe that's a really normal experience, which I'm referring to. I don't know. Maybe this is normal for everybody, but anyways, it's like I don't feel like I can have anywhere where I can truly call home, which is not true of a lot. Like a lot of people grow up and they feel this sort of sense of alienation, but at the same time, it's like at the end of the day, I feel at home in I don't know, Kansas or I don't know, Russia. who the F knows, but yeah, like I don't get that feeling anywhere. So it's like I don't have like a home base, I don't have somewhere that I can just go back to and like be like, oh, finally I'm back home. Like, so it's like it's a really conflicting feeling. It's like I'll go to these places and I'll feel alienated, and then I'll miss if I leave where I'm Canada for Taiwan. I'll feel good for a while, and then I'll start to feel alienated and want to come back to Canada because I feel like I feel more at home there. But then when I go back, I'll miss Asia. So it's like I don't know. And the reason how this relates to being NEET is that I feel like it's these sort of experiences that causes people to turn towards things like the internet, having a difficult time finding people to relate to in real life. I guess if anything, there's more people out there that you can interact with in the internet, infinitely more people on a much smaller time frame. Like it's way easier to send a message than have a conversation. So you can literally seek out like billions of different communities and find that little niche where you fit in. And it's very easy to get lost in the internet, in the digital world. And I feel like that is where a lot of people like me find refuge. And obviously not all of us turn into NEETs, but I feel like, at least in my case, it certainly is an influencing, a heavy contributing factor as to why I'm currently NEET and why I have this constant sense of alienation, which could very well be explained by numerous other mental illnesses, because there are a lot of people in my position who end up finding a culture that they identify with. So obviously it's not entirely just the fact that I grew up as a quote unquote third culture kid. You can look the term up. It's a official term describing the sociological phenomenon that is the third culture kid or whatever, and that's basically me. And but in a lot of ways, I'm sure that other needs can relate to that feeling of just not belonging, not relating to anybody. And this is a pretty long, rambling video. So yeah, I don't know. I'm probably gonna upload the whole thing as one. But I hope, even though it was as long as it was, I hope that it was at least engaging enough to hold your attention. And so if you guys like this content, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button below. And this is Comfy NEET signing out.